Good morning to you all out there in YouTube land. A beautiful day here in the South. Greg Angello with you on Planet One Podcast. Talked about it before. Go to planet1podcast.com. That takes you to my YouTube channel here, and you can see all the other videos that we've been doing. And I really appreciate all of you who have been coming in as of late, checking them out. I just finished one a couple days ago talked about worrying, right? Something that we all deal with in our lives. And we're going to have a conversation about another subject that I'm sure that all of us uh, deal with as well. And some of us do not embrace it very well. Some of us struggle with this certain thing. And we're going to talk about what I call a transition. What is a transition? And how do you know you're going through one, right? And how do you embrace it? But before we go to the transition, we're going to take you back to a couple of podcasts that we've done. Really encourage you to go back to the one that we did with Chris Bushnell and also with the one that we did with Stefani Boyd. So both of those talked about the mortgage industry. They talked about buyers in this market. And we know that we are sort of like waiting for something to happen. Usually it's going to be interest rates that are going to dictate how buyers are going to move. Unfortunately, that is usually what it is. A lot of times there are people right now who are trying to get their credit score fixed. They're trying to get things done. They are also going through a transition. One of the things that we work with in our industry in real estate is what we call a transition of buyers. Many of them are sitting in a rental position right now, and they really don't know exactly when the right moment is going to come. But I think the conversation we're going to have in just a little bit about transition sort of plays into that transition of renter, buyer, home ownership. Because a lot of times we get stuck in what it is that where we're at, what we're doing, and we may be afraid to make that move. And because we're just uncertain how it's going to work, if it's going to happen. And a lot of times, as I talked about in the other podcast, is that worry, the unknown. What are we stressing about? Something that we haven't even experienced yet comes into play, and fear also is part of all of it. So, excuse me, got to watch my hands. Okay, so encourage you to go there and check those out, and also appreciate all the comments. So the conversation I want to have with you this morning is about transition. Another word for it is change. And I am one who I can tell you that I have gone through a lot of transitions. I've gone through a lot of change in my life over the last 10 years. It's not something that many of us embrace very well. I also want to preface that if I do say during this podcast, if I use the word you, I don't mean directly like you, that to you. I mean it in a universal sense. It's one of the things that I've been trying to change, trying to have a transition in some of the words that I use to be more universal, to say more about we than you. Another word is us. So I like to have inclusivity. So I am here with my wife and my son, Isaac, and some of our extended family on my wife's side here in the Charlotte area. Folks, I want to tell you right now, looking back 10 years ago, if you would have asked me, where would you be in 10 years from now? Charlotte, North Carolina would not have been a conversation that I would have said. Doing real estate. Had a very good book of business. When I got into real estate in 2014, I came out of working in the law industry, working for lawyers for 20 years, some very prominent lawyers, very large law firm. At least one of them were in Detroit, in Metro Detroit. So had great amount of experience working with many trial cases, and I learned a lot from that. I'm not a lawyer, just to for full disclosure, but I was very entrenched in the law industry. I was going to, at that time, back in the early 90s, I was going to University of Detroit Mercy, and I was in a pre-law program, getting ready, thinking about going to law school, and a lot of things took place. A lot of things that I didn't anticipate were going to take place in my life, and it sort of stopped me from going into law school. But nevertheless, things continued to move forward. So real estate happened in 2014, and then we started having a conversation about maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 2000, probably 17 into 18, about going, if we were going to stay in Michigan or not. but North Carolina was not on the radar. But nevertheless, here we are. And so before we lay out all of these other things, you have to ask yourself initially is like, how are you embracing exactly where you are right now? Are you dealing with it like having a tantrum about it mentally all the time about where you are? Are you content with what it is that you're doing, where you are, or are you not? So many of these things happen in our lives when we are dealing with change. It's called a struggle. Anytime we start moving into another direction, we're not sure what's going to happen. There is always some pushback about it. There is maybe some resentment about it. Depends upon who is around you in your, your unit, your nucleus of your family, or in your life as well. But there are people who have no choice. They just have to get up and move. And some people want to move, and yet they don't, or they struggle in wanting to do it. And so let's have a little conversation about why change, the transition, is so hard. And one of the ways to look at it, I have lived in a neighborhood for many, many years growing up, and we were around many of our neighbors who we knew for probably 25, 30, 40 years. And maybe you can associate with this. Have you ever been to their homes? And every time you go in there, it really doesn't matter what season it is, but everything is always the same. It's like the furniture's always in the same places. The pictures are always the same. The all of the little knickknacks and all of those things, maybe heirlooms and things of those nature, they're always in the same place. The same towels, the same dishes, the same lighting. Nothing really seems to change except the year. And it looks nice. Everything is organized. Everything is sort of in its place, but it's the same thing you see all the time. And sometimes we just ask ourselves, is when you go back to your place, does everything always look the same? And is that a good thing? Is it a good thing to always keep things exactly where they are instead of moving them around? Because what happens if you do? Is that going to upset my balance in my life? Is that going to change my micro universe that I live in? Because we like to hold ourselves in our own bubble, in our own world of our own universe. And because it's very, very content, there's not a lot of friction. And so change causes friction. It causes our universe, our micro universe of ourselves to change, to pivot. And so fear is part of all of that. That is part of that nucleus of transition. So with me, having to go through that transition wasn't easy. There was a lot of struggles that I dealt with. And I have to look back and say that one of the things that we deal with when we are thinking about or contemplating change is that we don't verbalize that change very well. People may say to you, you could be in a relationship with someone right now, and they could be saying to you, well, what about if we just packed everything up and we moved here? I don't want to live here anymore. Now, you love this person, and you may do this for that person, but maybe you're not doing it solely for yourself. And yet you say, okay, yeah, let's try it out. Let's, what do we need to do? I mean, do we need to sell everything? Like, how is this going to work? Where are we going to end up with? And now that person in their mind is saying, this person's on board. So if you're not on board with a transition, you really need to make note of it. You have to express it and be transparent about it, because many times when we're in situations dealing with a confrontation regarding a dialogue that we may not agree with or we're not happy with, is that we just stay silent, or we just say, okay, yep, no problem. No, everything's good. Everything's good. When we know in our mind that it's not. And so then we start wrestling with it in our head. Why am I actually doing this? Why am I going forward with this? Why did I agree to do this? And so you have to look at those of us around us in our lives, because they are thinking that, well, you're on board with it, so let's go. We're good with it. And then you move forward in a position of not wanting to go. So let's look at how change can really be more beneficial for you than holding back into and holding on to the things that you've always held on to. Because there's always doors that are in front of us. All of us have doors that are there in front of us. We don't know exactly what is in front of us through that doorway. We know where we're sitting. We know some of the doors that we've been through, which is through our work changes. It could be through relationship changes, those doors that we've been through. And maybe those were difficult to go through at first, but yet here we are. And so if you look at it from a perspective of embracing this as an opportunity to see what that new door is going to bring you, because here you are with yourself. I mean, nothing really is changing. We still have the same air that we breathe. We're living on the same planet. And this is where we are. We're not like going to some other universe. And accepting that opportunity is, I think, is the first step in saying, yes, okay, let's take it forward and see where it leads us. I mean, what harm is going to happen unless you are going to be dealing in a very, financial situation that could harm you? But that's why you need to lay out some guidelines and some rules about what is it going to cost, where we're going to end up in that place, and all of that. But sometimes it's just about faith. It's going in faith. And I, as a believer, know that God works out all things for my good. And if you believe that too, we know that God works all things out for our good. He works them out for our good. Because sometimes what we think is good may not be. And so that's where faith comes in. Faith says that you have to be open-minded to embrace something that you may not see, and yet it's going to be good for you. That all things are going to work out no matter what. Tomorrow is going to come, and we'll still be breathing the air, and we are going to live our lives and making the best opportunity of going forward. It's like if you're going to plant a new, for a plant, you have to have the seed, and you need the soil, and you need to water it. But you're not going to have a plant or a flower on its own. I mean, it can obviously grow, things can grow on their own, but if you have an objective of growing something, you have to take the steps, and you have to open up the soil, and you have to drop the seed, and then nurture it, which is that's a transition. And so I would say to many of us who are fearful about transition is that embrace it. There are many people right now who have sat back until the pain was so severe, not physical pain, but mental pain of moving forward, or their struggles, that it really was the pain of itself that forced them to go forward. But you can alleviate a lot of that pain if you just accept the fact that I'm going to take on this new opportunity and see where it goes, because you never know who is going to be there in front of you with an open arm, with a helping hand. That many times that where we hold back from change, there is such a blessing in moving forward, because God wants us to move forward. And many times he's just going to let us sit there until, he's encouraging us to move forward, and yet we resist. So he's going to be patient. He's extremely patient. But as I said in that last podcast on worrying, we only have so much time. Time is not in a commodity that we can buy. Can't go out and purchase it. We can't get on the phone and call someone and get more time debited or credited to our account. Doesn't work that way. So one of the things, though, I would say is that instead of taking what we call, giant leap steps into something, is make small steps of transitions. It could just be things around your home. Transitions could be filtering out things around you in your household that you really don't need anymore and to get rid of them. I mean, I'm in this process right now. I know that the Lord is putting me in a position of transition. And part of that is cleansing and getting rid of things that we no longer need to hold on to. And a lot of that has to do with just possessions that sit around year after year after year and just sit there. I mean, what is the benefit of them to us other than just aesthetically? And so cleaning house is one of the things that helps us move forward, is letting go of the things that hold us, that bind us, sort of like bondage from moving forward. So if you're someone who really doesn't embrace change very, very well, take very, very small steps. Just getting rid of clutter, getting rid of things that you know you should have gotten rid of years ago. And once you start doing that, you're going to start seeing in your mind of things going to start opening up, clearing up the cobwebs, getting rid of all of the smoke that is blinding you, fogging your vision of what can be in front of you. And just say yes. Just say yes to change. You and I can move in a transition and embrace it. And that's part of it. So, but dialogue is very important. I've said this over and over again. If you're someone who along with me and our family, who go into prayer for things, and you may need to have someone in your life that you need to talk to and be open about what it is that you're doing, having a support person, having someone that is your go-to person that you talk to, that you trust, your accountability partner. It could be your spouse, it could be your friend, it could be someone in your, it could even be someone that you really don't have a relationship with because you're not really concerned about biasness. So that's part of it. Now, you may not agree with everything I said, and that's fine. And if you have other things that you've done into that transition, that you've made transitions and you embraced it, it's like you're looking out. It's like a child who is looking down, and it's like, there's the pool. How many times do you make a couple steps forward, getting into position to jump in, and then you step back? Oh, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. Not ready yet. Take another step forward. Put your hand in the water. Put your feet in the water. But you know what? You can see the bottom. Just jump. You're going to come out. You're going to breathe. You're going to be fine. You're going to be okay. All right. That's what I got for you. And wish you all the best. Thanks again for coming into the Planet One. We appreciate you. You want to be a guest on the show? You want to talk to me about what it is that you have going on in your life, stories that you have? I do want to make note before I close is I did a great podcast well over 3 years ago with this wonderful person here in the Mint Hill area, Debbie Carver, who has a great kettle corn business, Mama K's Kettle Corn, who went through such a transition in her life. Was if you would ask her, and she said on the podcast, if you would ask her if I would have been doing this in the future, she said, no, I would never thought about it. But they made the transition. They said they were going to do it. And as soon as they said they were going to do it, everything started to go in order and moving forward. All right. So check it out. Mama K's Kettle Corn is up on my podcast and it's up on the YouTube channel. Appreciate you all. We'll see you again very, very soon. Remember, embrace change. Could be the best thing for you. Have a great day.